EMHware plays for partners, and then what's the role that Greenspace plays for partners in extending, availability of assessments as well as diving into this concept of measurement-based care. Um, Obviously, as Jamal mentioned, there are some questions in the Q&A, and we'll work through them. But let me start with the call it the 20-second Greenspace overview. We were initially developed out of St. Nicholas Hospital in Toronto. Our focus from day one has really been to bridge this gap between research and clinical practice when it comes to measurement-based care. We are celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. More on that later in a promotion that we're running. Thanks, Jamal. And it's been quite a journey. Like the space has totally evolved over the last 10 years, and I would say the understanding, recognition, and adoption of measurement-based care is in a very different place as well. As an organization, we're now supporting almost 600 organizations have successfully implemented MBC and Greenspace. We now have what's likely the largest data set on measurement-based care in North America. And over those 10 years, I've learned a lot about what it takes from a technology perspective, what it takes from an integration perspective, and what it takes from an implementation and change management perspective to enable this for partners. And excited to talk a bit more about it today. We'll stay at a high level. I've got a number of resources I can point to and show, and we can follow up with. But we'll start at maybe the highest level of just sort of defining like what is measurement-based care and try to create the bounds between like assessments, measurement-based care, outcome data as ultimately three different concepts that are all interrelated. And so first off, on the top left of the screen, there's this definition that I particularly like. It's reasonably clear. It's from a 2015 paper. Measurement-based care is the routine collection and use of client-reported progress measures throughout treatment to guide clinical decision-making. So a few things that stand out here for me. Number one, client-reported measures. Number two, throughout treatment. And number three, to guide clinical decision-making. So within the bounds of measurement-based care, there is the use of assessment tools, so client-reported progress measures. But MBC itself is a process, and it is the process of MBC that can have a meaningful impact on outcomes, which we will talk about. And it is the process of MBC that will generate outcome data that can be particularly useful for an organization. When we sort of try and translate the research into practice, and what I would say that process into practice for organizations, we use this concept of the 4 Cs that I think makes this easier to understand. So the use of measures consistently throughout treatment. So it's not a one-time use of an assessment. It's, again, typically completed by clients, parents, caregivers, teachers, other stakeholders in care, less often completed by the provider. Number two, to the extent possible, we want to be customizing or tailoring the measures to the presenting issues, symptoms, and goals of the client. Ideally, we're also giving clients visibility into their own results and progress and making that part of the conversation, so that it's collaborative between client and provider in terms of how somebody's progressing through care. So again, MBC is a process, and Jamal is going to take you through some of the standardized assessments on EMHware. I think on this screen, some easy ways to distinguish like the role that Greenspace might play and the role that EMHware might play for an organization. Say most of our focus is measures completed by clients or parents or sort of other kind of caregivers or stakeholders in care. The need to complete measures consistently throughout care, and I'd say like the range of measures that like fit into the bounds of measurement-based care are really much like tailored to the programs and clients that you're serving. And the output, so the visualization, needs to be something that is going to drive meaningful value for the clinician and they can bring into their conversation with clients. So moving along, maybe the only other couple like points I want to make in terms of process and overview of measurement-based care. There's 2 conclusions in the research that are almost perfectly borne out in our data. Number one, the more assessments that clients complete, the more they improve. And this visual is from our data set that's showing as the number of assessments submitted go up, the outcomes we're seeing across clients are improving. This is not a causation effect, but there is a very strong correlation. And so for us, one of the key things from a product perspective and implementation perspective is how to engage clients in kind of consistent routine completion of measures. Across our platform, we see an average of about, I think it's like 14.7 or 14.8 measures completed per client. So we're starting to talk about like the volume that's needed here. The other one that's really important is clinician review of results. There's a direct correlation between clinician review and engagement with the visualization of results and client completion of measures. And there's also a correlation between clinician review of results and client outcomes. So when we talk about these two stakeholders and we think about that from a product perspective, what we're trying to enable is consistent engagement and completion by clients and consistent use of this information in session by clinicians. And that, that's what I think we're going to see from a product perspective today. And that's a big part of the thinking in terms of how we've developed and supported the integration with EMHware. So moving along, let's talk a little bit about sort of the Greenspace and EMHware relationship, and then let's shift into like what are some of the features here of the integration and sort of the Greenspace solution. What's the goal? Let's expand on the standardized assessments available within EMHware. So for organizations that want to go further in terms of available assessments or further in terms of implementing measurement-based care and that consistent use of measures throughout care, let's enable that both from an integration perspective, but also around how we approach support, subject matter expertise, and I'd say continued investment into that integration and the shared initiatives between our organizations. Jumping into some of the features and functionality of Greenspace and the integration, I'll try and highlight just like 4 or 5 that I think are important and interesting for today. So Greenspace has an existing database of over 500 assessment tools. There's a lot, but once upon a time, I thought, we'd get a few more requests and we'd be done. There, we build all the assessments that are available out there, and transparently, it's never going to happen. Like, we're at 500 plus. The kind of scale of requests don't stop, and for some organizations, it's a little bit tighter in terms of what they're using to kind of standards in a program or industry, but it's really broad in terms of the scope out there. And so we've kind of not only built out this database, but also kind of offer the development of assessments as one of the core parts of the product, right? So for many of our partners, we are able to add, like for many of our partners, we've added custom assessments and added to that library. In terms of some resources around what assessments are available, how to learn about assessments, how to choose assessments, there's some stuff I can send after the fact, but I'll just share briefly. Let's see, we have on our website under Learn, we have this assessments hub. Give some guidance on how to choose assessments, how to think about that, and much more detail on some of the most commonly used assessments, where you can click in and see, content about the assessment, some educational material in some cases, and things like that. We also have an external database that can be shared of here's all the assessments that we can present externally that are available to add for partners. There's about 350 in this database. There's others, as I mentioned, internally that we can make available, but it's often a process to be able to present those externally to partners. And then I've also talked about before this, like what is measurement-based care and how do we define this? I think this is a great resource we have as well of like measurement-based care 101, what are the kind of key components? And then a 4th resource that I think I'd like to share after the fact is we've got this knowledge hub that we developed with 4 researchers out of Yale University. They're called the Yale Measurement-Based Care Collaborative. They are 4 of the leading voices on measurement-based care that exist out there in the world and publish a lot of research on implementation of MBC. So there are some really great implementation resources in here that if folks are thinking about measurement-based care, have already implemented, are considering, like there's some great stuff here that I'd encourage people to check out and I can share after the fact. Okay, jumping back into our slides. Great, so we've got lots of assessments available to choose from. I mentioned process as being really important, right? It's one thing to have assessments, but measurement-based care is about process. So via the integration and also in the Greenspace application, there's lots of ability to automate workflows. in an effort to bring down effort for clinicians and administrators. So what that might look like is saying, hey, everybody in my adolescent outpatient program presenting with depression is going to get these three measures. They're going to get an adolescent focused depression measure that I want them completing every 2 weeks. I'm actually going to send a family functioning measure every 4 weeks to that client and a parent or a caregiver. And I want a therapeutic alliance measure completed by that client every 6 weeks. And so you can have a tag that automates that entire flow. So the clinician doesn't have to remember every time they see that client which assessments they're supposed to complete, and did they do it the last time, and they don't have to sort of manage this whole kind of scheduling process. There's some other kind of key pieces to automate through the integration, like client registration and some profile information, and setting up a code that you could use on a tablet in the waiting room. But the key is, like, let's bring that effort down via integration and technology. Number three, how do you make it really easy for clients to complete assessments? How do we give lots of options? How do you make that seamless? I've got some examples on the screen here. I'll show an example live right now just to give people a sense. Here's Carrie Douglas as a sample client. Let's just manually trigger this depression measure for Carrie to complete by email or text message. This would have otherwise gone out on March 17th. I'm going to sort of a fake email account here. Let's refresh. Carrie has a new email with a new assessment to complete. Again, this would go out on an automated schedule. It could also be a text message, and this can be rebranded for your organization, so it's not coming from Greenspace. Whether it's an email or text, simply click the button, and the measure is available right away to walk through and complete and submit. A majority of these measures are completed on smartphones or mobile. There's no mobile app you have to download. There's no login required. There's no account creation required. We make it as seamless and frictionless as possible to engage clients in completing these measures outside of session. So back to our slides again. Great. We've now completed the assessment. Tried to simplify workflows, reduce effort, make it easy for a client to complete. The next piece is, how do we deliver value back to that clinician and client in terms of the visualization of results? And that is sort of the key value proposition for a clinician. It's the key aha moment, and it's the key clinical kind of utility of this process. So this is an example of a visualization on the right-hand side here. We present actionable insights, and very soon you're going to be able to configure these and layer in treatment recommendations based on what's happening with respect to assessments. And then we also present clear visuals of progress over time and kind of a heat map or breakdown of underlying items and symptoms and how those have changed. The whole intent of the visualization is to support a clinician in understanding what's happening with that client and bring it into conversation. And then finally, we've talked about assessments, process around measurement-based care, but let's talk about outcome data, whether that is for internally managing care and seeing, what's happening across this panel of clients or caseload, who's presenting with risk, who might be off track, and clicking down a level and seeing how you can support, how you can be proactive, how you can bring this into clinical supervision. Whether we might use this data for sort of internal program improvement. So, which programs are most effective for which client populations? Where do we have health disparities? Where do we need to improve? We also support teams with benchmarking against others in the industry, so they have a sense of where their programs are stacking up in terms of outcomes. The sort of third and often the most useful at like a C-suite level is being able to use this outcome data externally, whether for grant writing, required reporting, advocacy, or other reasons. This is an opportunity to tell your story about impact. My expectation is 3-4 years from now, we're all sitting around this room, and this is a required part of the provincial data system. This is a required part of delivering services. For many accrediting bodies, it's already a required part of evidence-based practice, but it's such important data for our system to understand the impact of services for different client populations that this is like clearly a trend and direction of the industry. Our role is, how do we make it as sort of easy and impactful as possible for partner organizations? And that's part of why we love this relationship with EMHware, is we get to make that easier. We get to support on implementation, we get to support on integration, and I think we're all excited about how that's going to continue to evolve. Um, my last kind of comment here and promotion, and then I don't know, Jamal, if any questions have been flying through, but I've been head down running through a presentation here. It's our 10-year anniversary. Weren't quite sure. Thank you. We weren't quite sure, what do we do? How do we celebrate this? We're excited about it. Will anybody else care? Um, and our team came up with an idea that like our mission is to make measurement-based care more accessible and like move the adoption curve in this direction. So we want to make it easier for groups to get started. So in the first quarter this year, for organizations that are looking to implement measurement-based care or thinking about this, we're going to bring that cost down. We're going to remove sort of our integration fees and implementation fees and make it easier for teams to take on this practice. Um, so happy to talk more about that. Happy to connect you with others that we work with or other team members that have lots of experience with your type of organization. But this is sort of something we're running right now, which so far seems to be well received, but at least we're excited about the anniversary.
Absolutely, Simon. I mean, people love free. We all do. But also, I think, thanks a lot for the presentation. I'm really happy that you delved into your analytics and your BI solution and how that can really kind of unleash potential for agencies, and providers to be able to not only ingest the data, but be able to present it to a variety of different stakeholders all natively within the platform. I think it's great stuff. As we become more data driven and evidence based, we're going to need really strong BI solutions that are easy to use, easy to navigate, and that are enriched with a lot of data. So that's
Mhm.
fantastic.
Yeah, and
Okay,
other
so
convers. I
yeah,
see
go
a
ahead.
question here around.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, the
Yeah,
yeah, Jennifer, thank you for the question. Just to repeat it, for folks, if it's not visible, I think if I go answer live, people might see it. You talked about the visual of assessment results being available for the worker on EMHware. Is it also available for the client? So via the integration today, it is available within the client chart on EMHware to make it really easy for the clinician to access it without having to jump into Greenspace as another platform, despite what we might do around single sign-on for our partners. Um, for the client, you can also make this available for the client by inviting them to access their own account. That's something that by client, you can make that decision of whether to extend that invite. Some organizations leverage sort of client accounts and client access to results very heavily and invite and push to have everybody engage. Others don't invite anybody and want to create more of a process where the clinician is sharing it in session. I think regardless of approach, that kind of visual back to the client, whether in session or independently, can be a really valuable component for measurement-based care.
perfect. Thanks a lot for the question, Jennifer. So, again, feel free to keep the questions coming along, and we will either carve out some time, um, as we motor along or towards the end to address all questions and concerns. But that was a great one. Now that even spawned some questions that I have as well, but I'll ask them maybe another time. Got something else to do. Okay, team. So we'll be shifting gears here, and I'll just share my screen in a moment. There we are. Ah, it's okay. We can just rifle through. Okay, team. One moment. The woes of dual monitors, am I right? Okay, standardized assessments with EMHware. So today what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through a few of the standardized assessments that we have on offer. A lot of this is going to sound pretty familiar to a lot of our agencies and customers that are on today, but we're also happy to accept any questions that you may have about the assessments as they stand now or for our future roadmap regarding the assessments. Okay, so what do we mean by standardized assessments within EMHware? So as you know, we do offer some standardized mental health assessments, which can be inputted, searched, and submitted all in platform. There are key differences between what we call, of course, case data and standardized assessments. I'm sure quite a few folks on this call know about our case data functionality and how robust and flexible it can be. One of the main kind of differentiators of a standardized assessment is that the standardized assessments are directly licensed and sourced by providers. And with that, that also gives us the capability on an assessment by assessment basis to be able to enhance or enable submissions directly to the provider of the assessment. So just providing kind of more efficiency there. So we'll go through some of the assessments that we currently offer as dedicated modules, and these are available for all agencies regardless of your account tier or account size. So first off, we have supported by interRAI, the Children Youth Mental Health assessment that is specifically targeting the child and youth sector and subsectors, otherwise known as the CHIME. And CHIME is designed for children and youth to assess emotional, behavioral, social, and cognitive functioning. It's used by clinicians and community health workers to help guide treatment plans and assess a child or youth's mental health profile over time. So, one of the main questions that I get about the Chime as I interact with folks and agencies is, as you dig into the Chime and interRAI's assessments, they have quite a few versions normally on an assessment by assessment basis, and the Chime is no different. So, we commonly get the question, so what's included in our Chime offering? So happy to answer that question now. So these are our various chimes. We have the OP, the IP, the Chime DD, IP version, Chime DD OP version, Chime DD M version, for OP, the screener, and the screener plus. So a lot of these assessments do offer a specific version focusing on, of course, development, focusing on screening, whatever it may be, as well as, of course, IP being inpatient and outpatient being OP. So we do have quite a few versions. We don't have all of them. So I always ask agencies that are interested in a specific assessment or a specific version of an assessment that isn't offered to let us know, and we'll see whether or not we can actually adopt that version, in this case within our Chime offering. Okay, next up we have the interRAI CHA, Community Health Assessment for mainly adult mental health, assisted living, and residential. CHA helps identify support needs for older and disabled adults. CHA can be used in a variety of agencies and programming, including independent residents and assisted living. Next up, let's talk about OCAN. So right now there's OCAN 3.0, which is Ontario Common Assessment of Need. And it's predominantly used by agencies working in adult mental health and addictions. So OCAN 3.0 is used to identify the needs of clients receiving mental health and addictions programming in Ontario. And it helps workers with keeping track of treatment plans and a client's recovery journey, including interventions, normally over a long period of time. And it is Ontario specific for now. And I do know that there could be some modeling of the OCAN in different provinces, but of course, for the purposes of this assessment, it is Ontario specific, and it's used by over 200 agencies and orgs. EMHware as well supports IAR submissions for OCAN data. So just a bit of an FYI there, in case you didn't know, IAR submissions are supported through our module offering. Another thing that I do want to bring up regarding OCAN is that within EMHware and within our interface, there's a specific functionality that enables OCAN to shift the assessment into a consumer mode. So it enables providers to either, fill out the assessment on behalf of a client during intake, or it also enables providers to turn on consumer mode and enable the client to fill out the assessment on if they want to on their end. And that can be done, for example, let's say through a tablet computer or a tablet offering. Next up, we have the MHQCY, the Mental Health Questionnaire for Children and Youth. And this is, of course, oriented towards child and youth. MHQCY is a suite of brief, self-completed questionnaires for youth aged 12 to 18, as well as parents and caregivers for youth, children and youth ages 4 to 17. It focuses on assessing the characteristics and mental health needs of children and youth agencies and their families seeking help from Canadian mental health associations for the most part and Canadian mental health agencies. EMHware works in partnership with McMaster University in providing this assessment. And just as well, a little bit of an FYI that the MHQCY is fully integrated with our client portal. So if you do have client portal activated within your EMHware instance, you can send the MHQCY through the client portal and have it completed by clientele or, of course, parents and caregivers, depending on who will be filling out which assessment. Okay, that's all I got. Those are the bulk of our standardized assessments that we have at EMHware right now. So as per usual, if you do have any questions kind of leading up post-webinar about any of these offerings, feel free to reach out to accounts@emhware.com, or you can reach out to me directly, jtechlo.emhware.ca, to set up a consultation or a business review. Okay, so for now, I will quit sharing my screen and let's come back to the Q&A. See what cropped up. Okay, so I got two questions and they're both about OCAN 4.0. Why am I not surprised, Jennifer and Kim? Great questions. Okay, so OCAN 4.0 is underway. So we're in the midst of working with our partners at Ontario Health to be able to develop OCAN 4.0 and update our module for EMHware. So right now, we're still we're inking the agreement and kind of sorting things out and developing requirements. But that is in scope, and we do hope to tackle the OCAN 4.0 updates sometime this year. And to answer your question, Kim, yes, it will be available, and we're hoping to, again, get it available hopefully sometime this year. Okay, we have another question by an anonymous attendee. Has there been any consideration for EMHware adopting the locus? I was wondering, said anonymous attendee, would you be able to let us know what the full assessment is for the locus? Unless Simon, are you familiar with the locus at all?
Um, yeah, I am familiar. Say not intimately, but my understanding, I mean, the level of care utilization scale, I think is the acronym.
Okay. Yeah.
Typically provider completed. We've seen versions like a Cal Locus and a couple different ones. Um, I think my sense is there's like an assessment and conversation that's led by a clinician or an
Hmm.
intake worker, and then the locus is scored. I don't think it's particularly long. I believe it's something we've supported on Greenspace. Not 100% sure off the top of my head, but it sort of fits into the probably closer to something like an OCAN
Right.
or an EMHware like
Okay.
complete like provider completed
Yeah, a
measure.
provider completed assessment. So on my end, I have not heard too much about the locus and adopting it within EMHware. But again, this is one of those situations where it's always important for us to hear from you, agencies and our customers, about what types of assessments you would love to bring in. So what I'll do is we can set up a call, discuss, or I'll just take it back to the team and see if there's any appetite in moving forward with that. Well, thanks a lot for bringing it up. Okay,
Seems like
next
the
up.
next two are Greenspace ones.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so currently the MHQ-CY is not available in Greenspace. It doesn't mean it cannot be available in Greenspace. It obviously fits into this category of like client completed or parent completed. Um, I think a number of years ago we had some conversations with one of the authors and with McMaster. Ultimately, I don't believe we've had a partner organization request it yet. Um, so if that's of interest for an organization that's either on or looking to use Greenspace, I don't think that would be too hard to for us to be able to make available and work through. So I'll answer that one live. And then the other question is, Simon, is there a way to get a list of the assessments available on Greenspace? Yeah, absolutely. We can share as sort of follow-up resources. Jamal, I'm assuming we can share a
Yeah,
few
100%.
links. Cool. So I'll share the sort of the assessment database that I flipped through on the screen share. Um, Feel free to have a look there. If there are measures that are not on there that your organization's interested in, as I mentioned, there are others that we don't have on the external database, but we do have in our database. There's just like a bit of a process around permissions to be able to pull something and present it externally, both with customers and authors. Um, and then if it's not something we've developed before, like as I mentioned, we're kind of constantly adding measures for partners. It's part of the service we provide. So reach out, we can have that conversation.
Great. Yeah, I think I'm happy that you kind of kicked off your presentation, Simon, with talking about how you thought with assessments that you were one and done. I think we kind of fell into the same same category once upon a time, and we're like, oh no, they're ever changing. They constantly get updated. OCAN 3.0 and 4.0 is a really good example of that. Even with not only adding new assessments, but also adding new versions of assessments, it can be quite an ordeal. But of course, it provides value to our customers and agencies. So we're happy to do so.
I agree. I think there's certainly are, and like there's quite a process that to do this well, there's quite a process you have to go
Right.
through around adding assessments. Like it's not just the ability on the technology side to build, but ahead of that, there's the process around licensing and copyright to
Right.
work through with an organization and potentially with authors or sort
Hmm.
of corporations that hold that. There's then the sort of development and the decisions around how do you visualize and what's sort of the most research effective way to present this information back. And
Mm.
then post implementation, you sort of have to do the testing and QA and have a really strong process there because this is something that clinicians and care teams are going to rely on. Um,
Yep.
and then outside of that, you then have the reporting at the sort of aggregate and dashboard level.
Exactly.
And so there's quite a few layers to and like being able to add a measure and do that well for teams. So over
Yeah,
the years, it's definitely been a transition for us in learning, you know, how do you to the extent possible, almost like productize those elements and make that something that's a repeatable, scalable process.
for sure. And I'm happy you called out their being able to do it well, right? That's where the elbow grease is applied, right? Because there
Mhm.
are so many different stakeholders, and I think this is something that I know I deal with when I'm talking to customers and agencies on our end here at EMHware. It isn't as simple as just plunking in an assessment, right? There's a lot of things that we need to go
Mhm.
through and take into account and ensure that things are scalable, repeatable, and are adding value to providers, right? Because at the end of the day, um, we're here for the clients, we're here for the providers. So if we end up not taking that care, things can go awry very quickly. Okay. Anyone else have any questions at all? I'll do my typical triple call for questions, and then we can look at adjourning. It's an old thing, Simon, that we do here. Okay, second call. Any questions for Simon or myself today? Third and final call. Okay. So in that case, with that, I think we can adjourn, take a few minutes back, maybe to get ourselves a proper lunch, or if you're like Simon, maybe shovel your walk because it's that type of day that we're having today. I want to thank you all for taking some time out of your day today to learn a little bit about not only standardized assessments that we have that are very provider centric within EMHware, but as well to take some time to learn about a lot of the functionality that Greenspace has on offer with standardized assessments. I think, Greenspace's approach to supporting NBC and continuing to invest time, effort, as well as resources into building up and bulking up their assessment library and assessment hub kind of speaks to their approach in really going to bat, not only for providers and to kind of streamline admin burden, but as well having a lot of these offerings that are client focused so that in turn really provides efficiencies to all stakeholders involved. So we felt like a very complementary and supplementary partnership that we have with Greenspace right now that's only growing. So happy to have you, Simon. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thanks, Jamal. Nice speaking, everybody. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, team. So as per usual, we'll be in touch with some follow-up information. In this case, we'll also provide some resources that we'll collect from Simon and the good folks at Greenspace. So you all take care. Stay warm, stay dry, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.